Here's that problem that we were looking at before. And we're asking the question, how many greats are there in the grandmother that is 6 million years old? So we're asking, how many 25s are there in 6 million? Oh, I don't know. It's too hard. I don't want to do this.
Blimey, he's right. It is the bells. They're there. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't go. Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. Just back it up. Back it up. Will you be quiet, too?
Don't panic. Don't panic. Don't panic. There must be a way.
This is 6.
Oh, okay. Okay, can you draw out what that looks like?
Ooh, that looks hard. And it
Good,
takes
and how would you
forever.
count that?
Must be a better way than that.
4, 6, 8, 10. And this is one left out, so it should be 11.
Cool. Could you solve that with another strategy, a different way? Okay, how would you do that?
4, 5, 6. But because this is -1, so take away from that 6, and this is 2, 4, 6, 8,
Oh my God,
10.
that's even worse.
Here,
This
because
is
you
crazy.
-1.
There's got to be a better
Can you just
way.
write out how we need to show that on our paper?
Sure. 6 minus 1. And if 6 minus 1 equals 5, then 6 plus 6 equals 12. 12 minus 1 equals 11.
Okay. Great, Cynthia. You did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Cynthia did do a fantastic job. But whoever dreamed up that insane way of doing sums should be shot. It's torturing people. There's a much, much easier way. Let's do the sum that Cynthia was doing with a ruler and a piece of paper. And she was adding up 5 plus 6. So 6 is the number we're going to add on. So let's remember that first of all. So put the paper next to the 0 and put your thumb on the paper where the 6 is. And hold on to the paper, and now we've remembered the 6. And then we just add it to the 5. And there's the answer, 11.
Just like that.
That was easy, wasn't it?
And now, it's
11 minus 5. What do you think that is? Well, 5 is the thing we're going to subtract, so we'll measure that off first. So put the thumb on the 5. Now we've remembered a 5. And we put the thumb on the 11, and magic. There's the answer 6 at the start of the paper.
just like that.
Just like that, just like that, not like this and not like that. We can't be left or right or wrong. It must be just like that.
Well, I must say you've been a wonderful audience. And I'd like to finish now with a little song. I can always tell if an audience is going to be good or bad. Good night.
Well, let's see how a professional mathematician goes about calculating things.
It's a little past 1:59 on the 14th of March. Happy Pi Day to you all. If you're expecting a culinary lecture, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. We do have some edible pie with a lovely pie on the top. That's for a little bit later. But we're going to be celebrating the mathematical sort of pie. So I'm Marcus de Sotoy. I'm Professor of Mathematics here at the University of Oxford. We're coming from the Department of Continuing Education here in Oxford, but actually we're being joined all the way around the world by loads of different people who are looking forward to doing a bit of experimenting to see whether we can calculate 3.141. Sorry, I should not have done that. That was a really big mistake. So remember to keep your questions coming in. We'll answer those in the last part of the online lecture or event. So here we go, 10, 20, 33 that time. Okay, let me get my calculator out. Let's see what value of pi I got.
You're using a calculator?
So, I can't do 100 divided by 33. Well, maybe I could actually. 100 divided by 33 is actually... yeah. But you've got to remember that mathematics, I'm being hassled here by my Daves for not being able to do multiplication in my head and division. So I've got 3.03.
Shall I put that in?
Yeah, 3.0303. So I probably could have done 100 divided by 33, actually.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Well, if a grown man like Marcus can't do it, why do they force little girls like Cynthia to do it? Huh? Anyway, let's have a look at our problem and see if we can notice anything. Well, do you remember our heroine from the previous episode? She was fourth generation American, and her great-grandmother was first generation American. Well, that's counting the generations from the time that the family moved, or a member of the family moved to America. But biologically speaking, we count the generations the other way round. The most recent generation is the 0th, the current baby, and the mother of the baby is the first generation before that, and the grandmother the second generation, and so on and so forth. So we want to find out how many generations it would take before we reach her and your and my and everybody's greatest grandmother. The column on the right is getting, the names are getting longer and longer as we go further and further back in the generations. And we have special names for the first 3 generations. That's the baby, the mother, and the grandmother. And then we come to the great-grandmother, and we don't have a special word for that. We just stick great in front of grandmother. And her mother, the mother of a great-grandmother, is a great-great-grandmother, and so on and so on. And the number of greats is getting bigger by 1 each generation down the tree. Down the tree? It's not a tree. Well, if you turn it upside down, it sort of looks like a kind of triangular tree. Or maybe it looks like a pyramid. In fact, it's both of those things. It's both a tree and a pyramid. It's a tree because it's like your family tree. You have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and so on, doubling up each time. Some of your ancestors may, in fact, find themselves in 2 different parts of your family tree. But for simplicity's sake, we'll assume it just doubles every generation, the number of ancestors. And that raises another question. How many ancestors have you got? Whoa! Well, we'll leave that aside for the moment. Let's get back to our problem about the how many generations in 6 million. Well, one thing you notice about this pyramid upside down tree. Oh, I didn't tell you why it's a pyramid. You, let's say you're the baby. You're at the top of the pyramid. And like the king of the castle, you're standing on the shoulders of the great people that went before you. And that's a pyramid. And with each generation, although the greatness of the ancestry increases as you go back in the generations, the greatness of not just the genes, but also the wisdom and the knowledge that you have increases generation by generation, because the wisdom can be passed on from one generation to the next and accumulated, and the mistakes of one generation can be recognized, and the next generation can be better informed and better advised. Anyway, so the greats get bigger one at a time. Well, we could draw the picture to make it look simpler. We could draw the picture in a kind of shorthand way by just writing down how many greats there are in each line. Let's do that. This is much easier to read and much easier to say too, because instead of having to say great, 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 we can just say great 3 or great 4 or great 2,560. Right. What else can we see? What else can we notice about this problem that we have to solve? How many greats are there in 6 million before the lightning strikes? Each generation is 25 years, so we've got to find out how many 25s there are in 6 million. Well, we could do like Marcus de Sauté does and grab a calculator, but in this case, maybe we can find an easier way. You can see that 6 million has a lot of zeros, so maybe we can do with the numbers the same sort of thing that we did with the greats. We just write down how many zeros there are, instead of writing out all the zeros. That would be shorter, and it might make the picture... Oh my God, that looks horrible. Oh, it's much longer than before. Oh, no, wait a minute. The 6 million looks a bit clearer. The other numbers, they look horrible. I don't know if I like this. Wait, let's not panic. Remember the wise words of Corporal Jones.
No panic! No panic!
Look at the 6 million. I found a shorthand way of writing great, 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 great by just writing the word great once, and then a little number to say how many greats we mean. Now, since we don't know what that number is for our oldest human ancestor, I've just written est, maybe for estimate, or maybe for greatest. Maybe she's the greatest grandmother of them all. And for the 6 million, well, 6 million is 6 lots of 1 million. And 1 million is 6, by coincidence, 6 lots of 10. 10 times 10 times 10 times 6 times. Now, in your ordinary life, you probably think you'll never need to know how to write down big numbers or even to imagine them. They're just big. You know, I mean, for example, Eartha Kitt wanted to marry a millionaire.
I'm just an old-fashioned girl with an old-fashioned mind. Not sophisticated, I'm the sweet and simple kind. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire. I'd like a plain, simple car, a cerise Cadillac, long enough to put a bowling alley in the back. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire. I'll stay weaving at my loom, be no trouble to my groom if he'll keep the piles of money mountain. In our cottage there will be a soundproof nursery, not to wake the baby while I'm counting. I like the old-fashioned flowers, violets are for me. Have them made in diamonds by the man at Tiffany. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire. I'm just a pilgrim at heart, oh so pure and genteel. Watch me in Las Vegas when I'm at the spinning wheel. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire. I'll ask for such simple things when my birthday occurs. 2 apartment buildings that are labeled hers and hers. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire. I like Chopin and Bizet and the songs of yesterday, string quartets and Polynesian carols. But the music that excels is the sound of oil wells as they slurp, slurp, slurp into the barrels. Our little home will be quaint as an old parasol, and instead of carpets I'll have money wall to wall. I want an old-fashioned house with an old-fashioned fence and an old-fashioned millionaire.
What a marvelous voice. And what a sexy lady, too. She's a sort of American Edith Piaf. You may not know Edith Piaf, but I'll find an excuse to share one of her songs with you a bit later on. So, Eartha wanted a millionaire. She wanted the millionaire so she could have the million. And now, that song, she was singing that song in 1962. And in those days, $1 million was a lot of money. These days, it doesn't buy quite so much. And why that is something we'll talk about in a future episode. But for now, the point I'm trying to make here is that most people, when it comes to big numbers like million and billion and whatever comes after that is just unimaginable. They don't really mean very much. They're just big.
To some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So
he was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
Numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
I bet Bertha wouldn't mind a slice of that stolen pie. 2.3 trillion. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? What does it mean? I didn't tell you that a trillion is 1,000 billion. And a billion is 1,000 million. Now, I don't believe in giving people homework. I think it's a very, very bad idea. But in your case, I'm going to make an exception. How many millions are there in a trillion? Well, that's your problem, in every sense of the word. I'm going to get back to looking at my and your and our greatest grandmother. How many greats has she got? When our heroine was born, her greatest grandmother was 6 million years old, or would be if she was still alive. And we're writing 6 million as 6 multiplied by 10 with a little 6 on top of it. It's just a coincidence that it's 6 million and there are 6 zeros in the number 6 million. And we're writing the million, not as 0000, but as 10 with a little 6 on top of it, denoting 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. Mathematicians call this little number the power of 10, 10 in this case. Why they use the word power beats me. I suppose it's because it seems more powerful than just multiplication, because it makes things really big. Anyway, that's what they call it, so this number is read as 6 times 10 to the 6, or 6 times 10 to the power 6. Okay, so we know that the greatest grandmother was born 6 times 10 to the power 6 years ago. And we want to know how many greats. So we want to know how many ests. We want to know what the value of est is based on her age and the fact that we know that there is one generation every 25 years. So we could try and divide 6 times 10 to the 6 by 25, but that seems a bit awkward. However, look at this number here. This is a nice, simple number, 1 times 10 to the power 2, and that's the age of the great 2 grandmother. But there isn't a simple relationship between the 2 in the great 2 and the 1 times 10 to the 2, because the great 2 is the great 2 grandmother. Now, when we're dealing with numbers, we have to make sure that we know where the numbers start. And the numbers start not with the grandmother, but with the baby at year 0. So this is why we need to take a look at the generations column in our table, and we can see that the great 2 grandmother is generation 4. Similarly, the greatest grandmother is generation est plus 2. It's plus 2 because the greatest grandmother is the est plus 2th generation in the ancestry of the baby. Well, you might think it would be more logical to choose names for ancestors that reflected their positions in the descent. But language only deals with things that people can see. And there aren't too many great-great-grandmothers walking around. And in the old days, there weren't too many great-grandmothers either, because people tended to die young from malnutrition or disease, because modern medicine wasn't invented until modern times. But there would still be grandmothers. So they had special names for mother and a special name for grandmother, although grandmother is, you can see, only a variation on mother. And then when people started living longer and great-grandmothers started appearing on the scene, they chose for some bizarre reason not to call them grand-grandmothers, but to introduce another word, great, because it's different from grand, I suppose. And no one's probably ever seen a great-great-grandmother, or there might be one or two around these days, but they didn't bother choosing yet another different name. I mean, they could have chosen the name for your mother. Well, your mother is the first generation before you. So instead of using the word mother, we could have used the word me minus one. That's not a very good word. I'm not very good at making up words. How about me one? And instead of grandmother, me too. Or you too. Oh dear, it's all confusing. Anyway, we're stuck with baby, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, etc. Now, how many generations in the greatest grandmother? Well, it's the same number of generations as in the baby plus 2 plus est. And it's plus 2 because the grandmother is the second generation before the baby. That's where the 2 in the est plus 2 comes from. Oh, I hope you've got that clear.
And now for something completely different.
I thought you said it was going to be completely different. It looks just the same. Well, yes, it is, but hang on a minute. Where have we got to? We've worked out that the fourth generation was 1 times 10 to the 2 years old when baby was born. And the greatest grandmother, who is the est plus 2th generation, was born 6 times 10 to the 6 years ago. So we know that 4 is to est plus 2 as 1 times 10 to the 2 is to 6 times 10 to the 6. 4 is to est plus 2 as 1 times 10 to the 2 is to 6 times 10 to the 6th. The generation of the great-great-grandmother is to the generation of the greatest grandmother as the age of the great-great-grandmother is to the age of the greatest grandmother.
And now for something completely different.
So we know that 4 is to est plus 2 as 1 times 10 to the 2 is to 6 times 10 to the 6.
And now,
So we know that 4 is to est plus 2 as 1 times 10 to the 2 is to 6 times 10 to the 6.
Just like that.
just like that, just like that, not like this and not like that. It can't be left or right or wrong. It must be just like that.
I must confess I like my fez much better than a hat, because I think it suits me best and makes me just like that.
Just like that, just like that, not like this and not like that. It can't be left or right or wrong. It must be just like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh, just like that, not like this and not like that. It can't be left or right or wrong. It must be just like that.
Just like that.
Saying that education in Britain today is what the department planned? Well, no, of course not. Is there anything else that the DES does? Well, we don't need it then, do we? QED. Quod erat demonstrandum.